Good afternoon. Thank you for participating in the TTG Equipment 2020 Virtual Fall Expo. In this short video, we will talk about fall tillage options in 2020. We will briefly discuss the need for soil remediation this upcoming fall, and we will conclude with some video highlights of some new and current tillage equipment options from John Deere. If we continue on the same pace as we finish out the current growing season, we should finally have a nice opportunity to begin to rectify some of our fields using fall tillage. I want to emphasize the word should, because we know the weather conditions can change, but at this pace, I'm fairly confident that fall conditions will be more than suitable. I also want to stress that, for the purposes of this talk, we are referring to conventional tillage practices and not no-till practices. The last two growing seasons were certainly hard on some of our fields, particularly those more challenging fields. We dealt with some wet fall conditions and incomplete tillage, and we dealt with some wet spring conditions as well. Looking back, for many of us, the fall of 2018 ended very wet and very late. If you remember, we essentially had a 30-day wet period towards the end of harvest that put the brakes on all field work. So many growers had to finish up the harvest in wet and even in some cases, snowy conditions. So due to that situation, it was a challenge to get the fall tillage completed in 2018 at all. And some of the fall tillage that was completed in late 2018 was done in less than ideal conditions. Moving on to the spring of 2019, it hardly needs mentioned that we had some incredibly challenging circumstances. We followed up the late fall of 2018 with a very wet spring in 2019 with late planting. And to boot, several of us were forced to plant in wet or moist conditions. And although we had some decent tillage success in the fall of 2019, it was still a late fall due to the late planting in the spring. So I'm sure there are a few cases where growers struggled to get all of their fall tillage completed in 2019. So again, we will hopefully be situated much better as we close in on the fall of 2020. And from an agronomic standpoint, I certainly think we will be able to make fall tillage a priority. We should have opportunities to work in better conditions, and I want to suggest that we spend a little time thinking about planning to address any at-risk farms that might have suffered some damage over the past couple of years. I can think of a few fields this spring that showed some stress, and the reasons for those stresses were not cut and dry after some testing and analysis. After closer examination, we determined that the plants were showing stress caused by last season's planting conditions. Sometimes those stresses rear their heads in subjective ways, but it just goes to show that soil has a life of its own, and sometimes soil can show stresses too. Needless to say, those kind of fields should certainly be a high priority this fall, whether it be fields that showed some kind of stress during the season, or just fields that weren't able to be worked during the last one or two falls. Rectifying a soil can take some time, but we can get a good start by trying to break up any compaction that is there and by promoting good soil structure wherever possible. In order to do that, we would start by incorporating some organic material into the soil profile, often by some type of deep tillage or ripping, thus promoting some good soil aeration during that process. We ultimately want to promote soil biological activity, which can help alleviate stresses and also give plants a good start the following spring. Being able to work in better conditions this fall will certainly give us a good start on this process. We will now move into some short video clips that will profile some of the new and current John Deere tillage products. We will highlight the John Deere 2660 VT vertical tillage tool, the John Deere 2680H high-speed disc, and the John Deere 2730 Ripper. you for watching this video on fall tillage options in 2020, and thank you for participating in the TTG Equipment 2020 Virtual Fall Expo.